Yes, my name is Jody Holland, and I'm a visiting assistant professor at the University of Mississippi, and also an adjunct professor at the Mississippi State University.
This is a very dangerous position in which to find oneself,
Very much so in this
especially
state.
when football season begins.
It is. I guarantee you that.
Right. So, what do you do?
What do I do? Well, I teach a multiple array of classes. I teach public policy, an introduction to public policy class. Basically, it's a opportunity for students, basically freshmen or intro level graduate students, also to get involved with public policy and understanding the concepts of it, how things look at this class from a theoretical perspective and substantive analysis of policy. I teach food policy, looking at local food systems and identifying how it can affect economic development and how it also can increase social capacity and bring communities back together. So that's another class that I teach. I also teach economic development and public policy, looking at how policy and economic development relates to each other and how all economic developers or entrepreneurs have to deal in the policy realm for them to promote business. So those are some of the classes that I teach currently. Research-wise, I do research on local food systems, identifying how federal nutrition programs can affect economic development and how we can identify and utilize federal program dollars coming into each county as economic development stimulators. So that's some of the research that I'm doing right now. From a service work, I sit on quite a few boards and work with a lot of communities in Northeast Mississippi.
So, why did you get interested in Grenada?
Well, I'm from Grenada. I went to.
Actually, you're from a suburb of Grenada.
I'm from Holcomb. I grew up in Holcomb, but I did go to high school, elementary school and high school in Grenada. When I finished here, I did move out of the county. I traveled to Delta State and studied and lived in Vicksburg and Jackson and Starkville and now Oxford. But as I finished my educational pursuits, I identified and determined that I was going to be staying in Mississippi. It took 13 years to get finish with school to get the PhD, but at that time I realized I wasn't going to move out of the state, so I decided to start finding places where I could invest and taking the information that I learned through educational pursuits and the experience of traveling across the nation and seeing if we can apply this to the communities in which gave me the values where I am today. I think it's important to give back to communities. So Grenada is a place where I see a lot of potential, and I'm interested to contribute if I can.
Well, I know you're a fountain of ideas. You've suggested a bunch just in the course of the last few weeks. What do you see in particular that gets your imagination going in Grenada?
Well, I think it's a couple of different things that's really important about Grenada. I think that could really take off and become a stimulator for Central and North Mississippi, and that is its local food systems that's so important. I know recently a farmers market's been created here. I just talked to a federal co-chair for an agency just this week, and they identified that the food movement that's going across this nation, when we look at specifically Mississippi, it has to start in central or northeast Mississippi. And Grenada would be a great opportunity for it because local producers have fertile land to produce from. The Delta land is all taken up by commodity crops, which is fine. But this local food movement needs smaller scale crops to produce. And Grenada would be could be a hub for that. Regarding stimulating and bringing back social capital to the community.
Could you explain a little bit more about the difference between the hills and the delta and why Grenada could be a hub given its transportation system?
Well, regarding from a transportation perspective, if we were going to look at the global markets of transportation, we can identify that over the past 30 years, the way that the freight flow has developed, it goes from Asian market to the West Coast. Usually Long Beach is where a lot of the containerization is moving. From there, it's railed to Memphis. From Memphis, then it's shipped to the Northeast states, and that's the major corridor for freight flow. Well, now that the Panama Canal has expanded, the major freight supply chain is going to shift in the next 20 years. Because of that shift, it's going to send freight from the Asian markets down to the Panama Canal and back north through the Gulf of Mexico. Once it gets to the Gulf of Mexico, there's going to be some decisions to be made by this supply chain, and that's going to be based on policy and business and ports and inland waterways. Well, Mississippi is a prime piece of land that can take on this freight flow, because once it comes to the Gulf of Mexico, we have on the east side of Mississippi the Ten-Tom Waterway. On the west side, we have the Mississippi River. Both of those could bring more freight up through the inland waterway systems. Well, after it comes through the containers, it has to be offloaded onto ports, at the ports and onto rail or road. Well, Grenada sits right in the middle of these two inland waterways, and Highway 82 is a connector that leads right from two major ports, one in Greenville and one in Columbus, and up to I-55. That infrastructure mechanism places a few different locations in North Mississippi as prime places for transportation and intermodal system connectors or hubs. Grenada would be one that could be slated for that. We have a great industrialization park that is set up specifically for these type of major infrastructure facilities that could come here. So I think from a transportation standpoint, Grenada would be a fantastic community to grow on this initiative as it flows forward.
You've got me thinking about this, so that it's also the case that along the Gulf Coast we have several significant deep water ports, and Grenada is only 85 miles south of Memphis on the interstate, and the Memphis airport is on the south side of Memphis.
Well, Memphis is it's the 17th. Last time I looked, it was the 17th largest city in the nation, and it's one or two largest transportation corridors for freight running through the United States. Well, being just 85 miles away, Grenada would be a fantastic place to set up secondary and tertiary supplies mechanisms for the Memphis market as we continue moving forward and identifying the streamlining process of transportation and infrastructure systems.